If someone were to ask you what makes Catholicism different, what would you say? Certainly, there's a lot of possibilities that we could just simply point at the church structure and say the churches themselves are very unique. Perhaps the statuary of all the saints and some of the angels that adorn our churches as well, pointing to those and saying, no other church has these. Maybe the Stations of the Cross, or even we get to the technical details, the way that our devotions are a little bit different, the ways that our prayers are quite differently arranged. There are many possibilities. But tonight we celebrate two profound differences. Two of the most important differences, in fact. The way that Jesus, as he is reclining with his disciples at the Last Supper, he gives us two gifts that make us different and distinguished from all the other religions and all other denominations. This is the gift of the Eucharist and also the gift of the priesthood. And by these things, he commissions us to live life differently by the example and the model that we're given and by the gifts that are offered to us. We started off this evening with a reading from the book of Exodus, and we're used to this book actually giving us kind of an insight into what happened to the Israelite people as they're freed from bitter and cruel slavery to the Egyptians. And this is one of the last moments that they are in slavery. And this is a moment of commissioning, a moment where the Lord gives them Passover. And this is a feast where they take and slaughter a lamb, where they eat of the lamb, and they paint the doorposts with the blood of that lamb as well. And this is a sign to the Lord that they've been redeemed. They've been purchased by the blood of this lamb, so that the death that is wafting over the entire land will not affect them, but it'll affect all others. And this truly is a foreshadowing of the gift of the Eucharist. Certainly, we're not necessarily in cruel and bitter slavery to the Egyptians, but we still struggle with cruel and bitter slavery to sin. We need to be redeemed from that, and we are redeemed from that by the blood of the Lamb and by the body that is offered to us in the Eucharist. And the second reading as well, it also points out this very reality that Jesus himself, whenever we enter into this moment where we celebrate and commemorate the Last Supper, this in fact is the gift of the Eucharist as well. Because the Lord, whenever he is offering out this bread, he breaks it and he reminds them, this is no longer bread. This is my body, which will be given up for you. And then he offers them all the chalice that is filled with what appears to be wine, but in fact is not, because he gives them his blood. That he says that this is the chalice of my blood. Do this in memory of me. So this tells us something profound about the gift that we receive. That this is the Eucharist. And it's not just a symbol, it's not just a sign. But this, in fact, is the Lord's body, and this is the Lord's blood. That as he gives these things to his disciples on the Last Supper, as he's preparing to offer up himself on the cross, offering over his body and his blood in the sacrifice on Calvary, he's offering it to them in these things, in the appearance of bread and in the appearance of wine. But what has truly become his body and his blood, he's offering them the sacrifice. But then we move into the Gospel of John, and we're told about the love that Jesus has for his disciples and for all of his children. That he loved them at that moment, he loved them to the very end. And this love moved and propelled him on, not just to give them the Eucharist, but also to give them a commissioning. And this is where Holy Orders enters into the picture, because he takes off his outer garment and he starts to wash the feet of the disciples, symbolic of reconciliation. And as he's going through, he's washing all of them, he's cleansing them. They're confused. They do not know what to make of this. And yet Peter, he tries to reject this, and yet the Lord insists upon it, because he wants them to be made new, whether it's in the waters of rebirth and baptism, or even in reconciliation that restores that water as well, that cleanses the dust from our feet. And then he tells them, as I've done for you, so you should also do for others. This is the moment whenever he's telling them that, yes, I've washed clean all of you from sin and from iniquity, but now's your time to go forward and to do the very same for all of my disciples, all of those who are children of God. And so this too, it emphasizes the priesthood. This emphasizes Holy Orders, those people that are set apart by God to his service and to his ministry, those people in our midst that are to represent and to be in the person of Jesus Christ in a very real way. That it's not just a mere figment of our imagination, but Jesus truly gives us this gift, that he wants himself to be present even in the ministers that are in our midst. And then we move into the way that we're not just simply receiving, but we're also giving. Because, in fact, the Lord, he gives us this gift of his body and his blood so that we may be nourished, and he gives us the gift of the priesthood, this gift of ministry. But then he also reminds us that we too are to go out and minister to others. That we're to invite them to this Eucharistic table, the banquet of heaven and earth, this table of plenty. That we are invited to go out and tell others about this because it is so unique. That it is a gift that is only given to us. And so we are given that commission to tell others. And then we're also given the commission to tell others about his church and about how they can encounter the Lord, especially in the ministers that surround his altar. And tonight, above all nights, we don't just look at these things and gawk at them, but rather we are renewed in our sense of these profound gifts. That when it comes to the Eucharist, we are reminded of this profound gift so that we do not just let it become a passive activity or something mundane or routine, but that we are reminded whenever we receive the Eucharist, whenever we receive the Lord's body and his blood, this truly is him, and he is present, body, blood, soul, and divinity, even though the appearances of bread and wine still remain. That this truly is the Lord's body and his blood. He's offering them to all of us so that we may be nourished, we may be given his grace, we might have life and have life eternally. We need this gift. We need the Eucharist to make it through this life. We need it so that we have God's grace at each and every moment of our lives. We need it, and we need the abundance that is given to us in this sacrament, in the Eucharistic table. So that is the first gift, and we should revere it and treasure it always. We should participate in it and receive it as often as we can. And then there's the gift of the priesthood. Now, certainly this is a class that is set apart, but this is a class that is dedicated not to a hierarchy, but to servitude. That they are dedicated to being the servants to God's people. That yes, they are in our midst and they are personifying and they are bringing to us in person Jesus Christ, whether it's in the sacraments or even in the Eucharist, that they act in the person of Christ in persona Christi. And this is a profound gift, one that I and so many others are not worthy to receive, and yet it has been bestowed upon us anyway, because God needs ministers for his people. And without the priesthood, there are no sacraments. Without the priesthood, there is no Eucharist, there is no forgiveness of sin, there is no baptism, there is no holy matrimony, there is no sacrament at all. And yet the Lord wants us to have the sacraments, and he wants us to have the custodians of these sacraments. So what does this mean for us tonight? It's an encouragement to pray for your priests, myself included and so many others, because it is so vital to the life of the church. There is no one who walks through all of the joys and the sorrows of life like a priest can. And yet they are there night and day. They are always available to God's people. They are selfless in what they do. At least they should be. And they should always be present to God's people for whatever they might need. And it's an abundant joy to participate in the priesthood, but it is also a difficulty because there is so much demanded of the priest. And there are so many that are rooting for his success, but there seem to be far more that are rooting for his downfall. The world at large, so many people throughout the world that are rooting for the downfall of God's ministers, and even Satan himself is trying to do battle against the priest, because it is the priest that brings Jesus to his people. Pray for your priests. Pray for myself. We have an important job to do, and it is necessary for the life of the church. And we need God's grace. We need God's blessing. We need his divine protection to ensure that we are always present and making sure that all of God's children are taken care of. And then there's the simple commissioning that as the disciples, they receive these profound gifts, so we too receive them. And we need to take these gifts to a world that needs to hear of these gifts. And not just in a passive way, not just telling about them, but we also need to encourage more ministers because there are far more positions than there are priests. That we need to continue to encourage young men, perhaps even in this congregation tonight, to consider joining the priesthood. But then we also have the works of charity as well. Because it's not just for God's ministers, it's not just for those ordained in holy orders to serve God's people, but it's for all of us. That we need to wash the feet of others, and we need to continue to strive to live in charity and love of one another. And that, in fact, is what we do. That we see the ways that God is ministering and serving us, the ways that He is giving us so many gifts. We ought to be free in giving those gifts to one another and telling others about the gifts of the Eucharist, about the gifts of the priesthood, and indeed the gift of the entire Roman Catholic Church. There are many things that make us different. Tonight we celebrate two of them. May we never let the Eucharist go unreceived or unnoticed or unrevered in the tabernacles throughout the world. And may we always celebrate the priests who bring us these sacraments, and may we pray for them and pray for more to join their ranks. For truly, by these things, the Catholic Church is distinct and forever blessed in ways that are beyond description.